Tonight, Denmark's Queen Margrethe to step aside, making way for son Frederik and his Australian-born wife, Mary.
I have decided that now is the right time.
The US Navy kills Houthi rebel fighters in a clash in the Red Sea.
We don't seek a conflict wider in the region. We certainly aren't looking for a conflict with the Houthis. The best outcome here would be for the Houthis to stop these attacks.
Unsealed cabinet papers shine a new light on Australia's decision to fight in Iraq 20 years ago. And spectacular New Year celebrations roll out across the globe. I'm Ricardo Goncalves. This is SBS World News. Good evening. Denmark's Queen Margrethe, Europe's longest-serving living monarch, has announced she will abdicate the throne within a fortnight. The surprising announcement clears the way for eldest son, Crown Prince Frederik, to become king, and his wife, Australian-born Princess Mary, Queen Consort. The Tasmanian will become the first Australian Queen, almost 24 years after they first met in Sydney.
The Prince fell for her first, and Denmark swiftly followed. For over 2 decades, Crown Prince Frederik and Princess Mary have been among Europe's most popular royals. But most did not expect their elevation to the throne to come so soon. The reigning monarch's New Year's Eve address, leaving the nation stunned.
52 years after succeeding my beloved father, I will step down as the Queen of Denmark.
Crowned in 1972, seen here with third cousin Queen Elizabeth, Denmark's Queen Margrethe is the world's last reigning queen. But half a century of service took a toll. A notorious smoker, the 83-year-old underwent extensive back surgery last year.
I have decided that now is the right time.
Her sudden exit shocked Danes, including the Prime Minister. And while it's not always plain sailing for the royal couple, few will protest the new king and queen consort. Eldest son Frederik, once considered a party prince and a thrill seeker. It was with the Danish sailing team at the 2000 Olympics when he met Mary Donaldson, a Tasmanian law student working in real estate at a Sydney pub.
Half an hour or so later that someone came up to me and said, "Do you know who these people are?"
A long-distance courtship blossomed, culminating in a lavish royal wedding.
But as of today, she belongs to me and I belong to her. I love her and I will protect her with all my heart.
Raising 4 children, their regular return visits down under, delighting loyal supporters. Last April, the Princess part of a trade delegation promoting the clean energy transition. The couple seen as progressive representatives, the future king, an outspoken environmentalist.
He's very, very down to earth and a very, very modern person. He has 4 kids, and for most of his kids, they actually went to public school instead of private school, so people feel very connected to him.
The ascension comes as tensions ripple through the Danish royals. Queen Margrethe's decision to strip royal titles from the descendants of her other children caused a rare public rift. There will be no crowning ceremony. A palace pronouncement will usher in a new era. Naveen Razik, SBS World News.
US Navy forces and Houthi militants have exchanged fire in the Red Sea, and for the first time, the US says it killed Houthi militants. Yemen's Houthi rebels say they lost 10 fighters. It's a significant escalation in one of the world's busiest maritime routes, but a key US Republican is calling on the White House to go further.
The Singapore-flagged Mares Kangzhou on a more tranquil occasion. Early New Year's Eve fired on by Houthi rebels who got within 20 metres as they attempted to board. US Navy helicopters from the USS Eisenhower and Gravely responding to the vessel's distress call, then fired on by the rebels. The Pentagon Central Command posting, the US Navy helicopters returned fire in self-defence, sinking 3 of the 4 small boats and killing the crews. The fourth boat fled the area.
We don't seek a conflict wider in the region. We certainly aren't looking for a conflict with the Houthis. The best outcome here would be for the Houthis to stop these attacks.
Shipping in the Red Sea under attack by Iran-aligned Houthi rebels for weeks, confirming 10 dead in the US operation, but expressing no regrets.
العدو الأمريكي يتحمل تبعات هذه الجريمة وتداعياتها، وأن تحركاته العسكرية في البحر الأحمر لحماية السفن الإسرائيلية لن تمنع اليمن من تأدية واجبه الديني والأخلاقي والإنساني دعما ونصرة للمظلومين في فلسطين وغزة.
The United Nations Security Council hearing warnings of the dangers of widening conflict in the days before the attack from a top UN official.
The continued Houthi threats to maritime navigation in the Red Sea is of growing concern. It risks exacerbating regional tensions and further escalation, and also has potentially grave political, economic, and humanitarian ramifications for millions in Yemen and the region.
In the Houthi rebel-controlled capital of Sana'a, for weeks, thousands have demonstrated against the actions of Israel and the United States. A fragile ceasefire in Yemen at risk by any military attempt by the US to thwart the attacks. But one senior Republican urging the US military to take its operations further.
I think the president absolutely has to look at what actions need to be taken in Yemen to be able to prevent the Houthis to continue to put commercial and military vessels at risk.
The White House not entering into that debate.
It's one of the most important, most vital commercial waterways in the world. And we have an obligation with our allies and partners to keep the flow of commerce moving there.
But it's more complicated than moving containers. Last week, the administration declassified intelligence indicating Iranian paramilitary groups have been coordinating the Houthi shipping attacks. The claim denied by Iran. Pruluan, SBS World News.
Israel's president says the war on Gaza will continue for many months. His defence force says it will last all of 2024. The IDF is starting to release 5 brigades from combat in the Strip as its troops increasingly gain control on the ground.
At the stroke of midnight, rockets, not fireworks, lit up the Gazan sky, foretelling the year ahead. In Rafah, displaced Palestinians gathered inside their tents, saying they have nothing to celebrate.
مأساتي وعظمها موجودة في داخلنا. العالم اللي برا مش شاعر فيها نهائي. هو خليه في فرحه وأنا خليني في مأساتي.
فقدت ابني وفقدت جوز بنتي وفقدت أغلى الناس عليا. كيف بدي استقبلها؟ يمكن أمنيتي في 24 يمكن أرجع لها إني أروح أشوفهم، أزور قبورهم، أتعرف عليهم، نشوف الطول تحت الأنقاض. بس هي أمنيتي في 24 نلملم جثتنا.
Similar skies over Israel as Palestinian militants returned fire, setting off sirens in southern and central Israel. But no injuries were reported. Earlier in the day in the Strip, at least 100 people were killed and some 160 injured, according to local health officials. They say almost half of those were killed by heavy Israeli bombing of Gaza City, where the yard of Al-Shifa Hospital has become a cemetery. 35 bodies recovered from the central Zuida, Deir el-Balah areas, including a journalist and his family. Many in Tel Aviv spent their last night of the year calling for a fresh start.
I want to see all the abducted people to come back as soon as possible, maybe tomorrow to Israel, because every day that passes endangers their lives and their suffering and the suffering of the families. And my second biggest dream is to see also this war end. Enough, enough, enough victims on both sides.
Israel will bring thousands of reservists home from Gaza, returning to their civilian lives to help the economy and recover for future fighting.
אלו התאמות שנועדו להבטיח את תכנון והיערכות להמשך של שנת 2024. צה"ל חייב לתכנן קדימה. מתוך ההבנה שנידרש למשימות נוספות והמשך לחימה במהלך כל השנה הזאת.
It's not expected to have much impact on the ground operation. The IDF claims the north of the blockaded enclave is largely under its operational control and is maintaining, if not boosting, forces in the south and centre, where fierce fighting is ongoing. More than 100,000 Palestinians have fled to the tiny border town of Rafah in recent days. The UN relief agency saying well over 1 million now seeking safety there.
نتمنى بسنة 2024 يعني يتصلح كل شيء وترجع الحياة طبيعية زي ما كانت. يعني ترجع الحياة زي ما كنا من أول، نرجع طبيعي، نلبس ونرجع ونتمشور ويصلحوا البيوت اللي اتدمرت. والسلام ختام يا إخوة.
Others say their resolutions are only to stay alive and see the end of 2024. Liz Maddock, SBS World News.
20 years after John Howard's Australian government joined the US-led coalition which invaded Iraq, Cabinet papers released today show the decision was signed off on the basis of oral reports by the Prime Minister. In the middle of last month, the National Archives said that the National Security Committee documents were not yet held by the institution, but the missing records were discovered on December the 19th. They haven't been released in time for the usual pre-publication scrutiny. Today, thousands of other documents were, and they show how quickly the Howard Cabinet approved the decision.
Toppling a tyrant, Iraqis celebrate as Saddam Hussein bites the dust.
A year defined by one decision.
The Prime Minister tonight took his argument for war with Iraq into the living rooms of Australia.
Australia joining the US-led invasion of Iraq. 20 years on from the consequential and controversial war, the Cabinet papers shine some light on how the decision was made after a request by the US. On March 18, 2003, the Cabinet noted oral reports by the Prime Minister on a request by the President that Australia participate in military action by a coalition to disarm Iraq of its weapons of mass destruction.
Forces have commenced combat and combat support operations.
That central claim proved to be false. Robert Hill was the Defence Minister at the time.
Was it in Australia's interest to join the invasion?
The threat that we saw from weapons of mass destruction, which we saw as a threat to Australian interests, not just to American interests.
Later that year, President Bush visited Australia and addressed Parliament.
You might remember that I called him a man of steel. That's Texan for fair dinkum.
But the national mood against the war was palpable, from public protests taken directly to the President.
But the President's speech was interrupted by interjections from Green Senator Bob Brown.
Today, Saddam's regime is gone. And no one...
Senator Brown, I warn you.
What you did today was a complete embarrassment, not only to yourself, but to the Australian people.
The late Simon Crean, then opposition leader, was more diplomatic.
On occasions, friends do disagree, as we did on this side with you on the war in Iraq.
But much of the story behind how the decision was made remains untold. Most discussions were had with a handful of senior ministers in the National Security Committee.
If you look at the 2003 year, the number of cabinet records that were created was quite a bit lower than previous years, and yet the records of the NSC in particular was quite heightened.
Prime Minister Howard, as a traditionalist, wanted to have the decision on going to war referred to full cabinet. So he does that.
The United Nations Security Council did not sanction the invasion, and its legality is still a point of contention. Mr Howard relied on the Memorandum of Advice on the use of force against Iraq, noting it would be consistent with Australia's obligations under international law.
I think it's important because it really gives the government a legal argument. It's controversial because many lawyers, many more senior lawyers, say the advice wasn't really good enough.
Even in June of 2003, there was a view the situation would be resolved quickly. A submission to Cabinet noted the impact the war was having on Australia's migration program. That onshore protection visa processing is taking the changed situation in Iraq into account. The importance of achieving returns, both voluntary and involuntary, to Iraq when the security situation permits. But it soon became clear there were no weapons of mass destruction.
I guess as the year wore on, we were scratching our heads, as everyone was scratching their heads.
So at least 200,000 Iraqi civilians killed, no weapons of mass destruction, prolonged instability in the region. Was it the right call?
In terms of protecting Australia's interests on the basis of the information that was known at the time, it was the right call.
20 years on, a decision seen in a different light. Pablo Vinales, SBS World News.
Coming up, China's president delivers a New Year's address warning of a stormy economic future. A return to power for the president of the Democratic Republic of the Congo confirmed, while opponents still demand a rerun. And controversial journalist John Pilger dies aged 84. China's President Xi has delivered a New Year address predicting what he called wind and rain for the nation's economy in 2024. Correspondent Andrew Wood joins me now from Hong Kong. Andrew, what's understood by President Xi's warning for the economy and any possible intervention?
Well, President Xi had a difficult New Year's message to deliver. The past year, 2023, was pretty awful for the economy. It was supposed to roar back after COVID. In the end, it didn't. And there's, consumers still seem quite, they don't seem to have a lot of confidence at the moment. So he had to acknowledge that there were problems in 2023, but that the state had managed to help Chinese people overcome them. And then looking forward, he has to accept as well that probably more policy changes are needed, more stimulus is needed for the economy. He acknowledged that. Because a lot of economists around the world are saying that 2024 will be worse for the Chinese economy than 2023.
Now, President Xi also marked the new year with greetings to several world leaders, Presidents Biden, Putin and Kim. What does that mean?
Well, I think the greetings to President Biden were quite friendly. The exchange of greetings with President Putin as well. There was a lot of information put out by the various ministries in Beijing, supplementing that, noting that the increase in trade between China and Russia was ahead of expectations. Remember, China is the biggest, well, possibly the biggest customer now for Russian oil since sanctions. The other interesting one was, of course, the greetings with President Kim, or Kim Jong-un, the leader of North Korea. And there was lots of warm talk of working together more closely and of greater friendship between the two countries over the next year. This is interesting. Remember, a lot of countries, especially in the West, say that China should try to use its influence to rein in the North Korean leader because his launching of missiles and testing of nuclear weapons is destabilizing to the region. But it seems at the moment China and, of course, Russia as well are moving closer to North Korea, despite the fact that both China and Russia are on the UN Security Council, and there are many, many UN Security Council resolutions against North Korea restricting content, which Russia and China seem to be ignoring for now.
OK, thank you for the update. That's Andrew Wood, correspondent there, joining us from Hong Kong. North Korean leader Kim Jong-un has ordered the military to prepare its nuclear arsenal in case war breaks out with South Korea and the US. Speaking to members of the ruling party, he said a peaceful reunification with the South can never be achieved.
No longer shared kin or blood, but two hostile nations at war. That's how leader Kim Jong-un now describes North Korea's view of South Korea. Countries once one, split into two in the lead up to the Cold War 8 decades ago.
Seeing as they call us their main enemy and collude with foreign powers, we should no longer make the mistake of considering South Korea a partner for reconciliation and unification.
It's a concerning development for Seoul, which strongly condemned North Korea's hostile stance.
He's basically said that although we are still one people, the South Koreans are puppets of capitalism, especially the United States. And he has given up dealing with the South Koreans peacefully.
At the conclusion of its year-end Key Party meeting, North Korea vowed also to intensify its production of nuclear weapons and military drones. That's as other powers strongly suspect it is strengthening military cooperation with Russia. This year, Pyongyang speedily developed its solid-fueled Hwasong-18 intercontinental ballistic missile after a record 5 launches of ICBMs. It also claimed to have sent its first functioning military spy satellite into Earth's orbit, with 3 more planned in the new year.
The conservative Yoon Suk-yeol government has emphasized that peace is earned through military strength, dismissing his predecessor's policy of engagement with the North as fake peace reliant on the enemy's goodwill. South Korea has recently engaged in high-profile military drills with Japan and the United States, and analysts say that Pyongyang's ruling out of a peaceful reunification is its attempt to legitimize the use of nuclear weapons against South Korea.
As Washington deploys strategic assets more frequently in the region and elections loom in 2024, analysts warn Pyongyang could find new reasons to respond more aggressively in the coming months.
Eunice Kim with that report. We've got some breaking news now. A magnitude 7.6 earthquake has hit northeastern Japan near Cape Suzu. Officials have issued a tsunami warning across western coastal areas, anticipating waves up to 5 metres high. The tremor was recorded at a depth of 10 kilometres, with authorities warning to brace for aftershocks. These pictures are coming from NHK, and the Bureau of Meteorology has noted that there is no tsunami threat to Australia. President Felix Tshisekedi has officially been named the winner in a landslide election victory in the Democratic Republic of the Congo. He faces a second term with 73% of votes, with opposition candidates demanding a rerun, claiming widespread disruptions to voting.
For some, it's a result that answered their prayers. Crowds gathered in droves to celebrate the re-election of President Felix Tshisekedi. The president was first elected in 2019, winning on the promise to grow the economy and create jobs.
Je voudrais vous rassurer que ce deuxième mandat que vous venez de m'accorder sera dédié à plus d'actions pour la matérialisation de ces engagements et à l'éclosion de ces initiatives avec comme leitmotiv de ne jamais trahir le Congo.
In a country where 2/3 of the population live below the poverty line, not everyone's pleased with the result. In some parts of the capital, the army has been deployed to tame protesters encouraged to take to the streets by opposition candidates.
Appelant la population congolaise et toutes les forces vives de la nation à rester mobilisées sur l'ensemble du territoire national pour sauver notre démocratie et notre nation en péril.
Logistical and security issues in the vast country meant 2/3 of polling stations failed to open on time. Ongoing conflicts made it difficult for several million displaced people to cast ballots. With reports 1.5 million people were unable to register. Voting had to be extended into a second day, and parts of the country were still casting ballots 5 days after Election Day. For some, the focus of their anger is on the president of the country's electoral commission, Denis Kadima.
Parce que la CENI de M. Kadima, en complicité avec M. Félix Tshisekedi, nous ont organisé de très mauvaises élections. qui n'avaient jamais existé auparavant. Et donc nous sommes en train de demander l'annulation de ces élections.
Calls for a rerun have been rejected by the government.
If somebody says they must cancel the result, you must know that they lost the elections. When you win, you'll never say cancel the result.
Opposition candidates opposing the results have 2 days to submit their claims, and the Constitutional Court has 7 days to decide. Achola Rock, SBS World News.
Vladimir Putin has praised Russia's army in his New Year's address to the nation. The nearly 2-year-old war in Ukraine was at the forefront of his pre-recorded speech, with the Russian president saying that they would never retreat. The address came as Putin gears up for an election campaign this year, where the conflict is likely to be eclipsed by domestic priorities such as the economy.
Today, I would like to address our military personnel, everyone who is at a combat post, at the forefront of the fight for truth and justice. You are our heroes, our hearts are with you. We are proud of you and we admire your courage. I know that now you feel the love of your closest and dearest relatives, the powerful, sincere support of millions of Russian citizens, the support of the entire nation.
The video address from Moscow ran for under 4 minutes, which was significantly shorter than the New Year speech he gave last year. Authorities at the US-Mexico border reported a record number of migrants in December. With the influx of migrants, mayors of so-called sanctuary cities, New York, Chicago and Denver, are taking action to slow the flow of migrants coming to them from Texas.
A breaking point at the US-Mexico border as preliminary Homeland Security statistics show authorities encountered more than 225,000 migrants so far in December, the highest monthly total recorded in more than 20 years. And from the border to cities all over the U.S. struggling to keep up. Because this welcome comes at a cost.
When you're talking about 10% of the budget to allocate for cities on this, that's unsustainable. When we have every single hotel room in the city full of migrants that have arrived, that's unsustainable.
For months, Texas Governor Greg Abbott has bused thousands of migrants to these cities, led by Democrats, resulting in turmoil and straining resources.
You know, at one point in the summer, we had 25, 30 buses showing up every single day without any coordination or any notification. He is now sending buses outside of the city of Chicago, in some instances 100 miles away, where people are being dropped off. They're being told that they are in the city of Chicago, literally dropped off in the middle of nowhere. I find that to be inhumane and unconscionable.
Some smaller municipalities have passed ordinances to try to stop the drop-offs, while the mayors of Chicago, Denver, and New York City are asking the federal government for help.
I think much more could be done, and with all of our national leaders, from a decompression strategy to making sure the cost of this is not falling on the laps of everyday taxpayers in our cities.
They are also demanding for coordinated drop-offs with exact times and locations to dedicate the appropriate resources.
What we need is everyone that gets paroled into this country should have the ability to work as soon as they enter. They should have federal dollars to help support them in the cities that they arrive in. And we should have a coordinated national plan for where those folks arrive.
In a statement, a spokesperson for Abbott accused the Democrat mayors of hypocrisy, saying they're now going to extreme lengths to avoid fulfilling their self-declared sanctuary city promises. The statement also said the mayors should call on their party leader to finally do his job and secure the border, something he continues refusing to do. But some activists believe the crisis at the border takes Republicans, Democrats, and all levels of government to solve.
And if the governments are not doing that, then most likely what we'll see is people will be further traumatized and harmed, and likely we will see more people die as a result of the inability of governments to really address the humanitarian needs that asylum seekers have.
Camilla Bernal with that report. Millions have marked the end of one year and the start of another, with celebrations around the country. Crowds gathering for fireworks displays in all the major cities and regional centres as they counted down to the start of 2024.
Sydney's iconic fireworks lighting up skies across the city to ring in the new year.
It was sensational, it was incredible,
Spectators of all ages staying awake until midnight to enjoy the show.
It was amazing, yeah. I've never seen something like that before.
So beautiful, amazing colours, and all of us were screaming out loud. We were having fun.
Around 1 million people gathered at harbour vantage points for the 12-minute pyrotechnic spectacle, doing what it takes to get the best view. In Brisbane, a spectacular show over South Bank. 85,000 gathering on the river foreshore. The weather not putting a dampener on the mood.
Worried about the rain?
No.
No.
We've travelled all the way from Ipswich. So we're happy to
just a bit of rain.
Get through the storm for all the celebrations.
Events across Queensland included packed-out beachside fireworks on the Gold Coast. Thousands in Melbourne gathered along the banks of the Yarra River to watch fireworks launched from skyscrapers around the CBD. Today, making the most of the sunny weather at the beach. Canberra's midnight fireworks may have been axed this year, but the 9 p.m. fireworks were a hit, crowds gathering at Lake Burley Griffin for the show. And this morning at the Australian Mint, the world's first coin of 2024, celebrating Australia's involvement in space. 12-year-old Izzy Zaharis from Wollongong winning the ballot and taking it home.
It's pretty cool, it's a nice design and stuff.
Revellers in Hobart enjoyed a waterside show as the last of the Sydney to Hobart competitors pulled into the River Derwent. Adelaide's Elder Park hosted tens of thousands for the first free fireworks event by the banks of the River Torrens since the COVID pandemic began. In the top end, thousands of people celebrated at the Darwin waterfront despite heatwave conditions. After last year's event was cancelled due to severe rain and winds, crowds delighted to enjoy fireworks as well as a water and laser light show. And in Perth, large crowds partying around the CBD under a shower of fireworks. And the newest additions, the first babies of 2024, born just after the stroke of midnight.
I'm very happy to see my daughter. I thank God for gave us the beautiful blessing.
In hospitals, at home and out on the town, a new year beginning in style.
Happy New Year, Feliz Año!
Alexandra Jones, SBS World News.
For parts of Queensland and New South Wales lashed by wild weather, it was far from the ideal New Year's Eve. At least 23 rescues were made overnight and this morning. In Queensland, authorities have issued 7 emergency alerts.
A brooding sky to close out the year 2023 on the Gold Coast. Further south in Coolangatta, it wasn't just fireworks lighting up the night. A major weather system has pummeled the state's southeast, bringing totals of nearly 400 millimetres in 24 hours to parts of the Gold Coast hinterland. No reprieve for those impacted since Christmas.
The ground is saturated, so when these new storms come through, obviously the creeks and the roads and everything rises very quickly. So people, even though they are doing the right thing, can become trapped.
The state government has set up 3 evacuation centres around the areas hardest hit.
Emergency services and volunteers are out on the ground, and presently we have over 500 deployed.
Nearly 7,000 customers are still without power. 18 roads across the Gold Coast were also closed due to flooding. Police warning of the potential for landslips.
If you don't have a reason to be on the road, please stay at home until we get through this event over the next 12 to 24 hours.
Northeast New South Wales was also battered by heavy rain. Residents of the northern rivers coming under advice level warning, urged to stay informed of rapidly changing conditions. The SES says in that area it's made at least 13 rescues.
We are urging people to move away from all creeks and rivers, particularly those who are camping along creek beds.
Those warnings seemingly ignored by some residents.
Why?
Why what?
Why would you do that?
The heavy rainfall is expected to continue tonight and into tomorrow morning.
It's likely that through Tuesday we'll start to see an easing in that rain, but it may not be until Tuesday afternoon and evening that it really tends to much patchier showers.
I encourage all Australians to stay across the Bureau's warnings. They're there for a reason, to give you information about what you can do to prepare for some very unpredictable events, to keep your families safe and your properties safe as well.
Queensland authorities are now considering a request for additional resources from the federal government. Tyso Cusey, SBS World News.
2 children aged 4 and 6 have died after their bodies were found in Perth's Swan River on New Year's Eve. The girl and boy were pulled from the water at Burswood near Perth Stadium, where revellers had gathered for celebrations. Police cordoned off the area and ambulances arrived on the scene, transporting the pair to Perth's Children's Hospital in a critical condition. Members of the public and emergency services performed CPR, but the children were unable to be revived.
I saw these 2 children was walking in close to water, but I just feel sorry now why I didn't stop these 2 kids to going close to water. I thought the parents is here.
A woman has been saved from a burning home moments after street fireworks were set off in Victoria's Mornington Peninsula. Witnesses claim a firecracker allegedly set the house alight. You should be able to see those pictures soon. An onlooker smashed through the window, dragging out a 57-year-old woman who had been trapped inside. Police are treating the fire as suspicious, with investigations ongoing. A truck driver has been charged after a train derailment that left 2 men dead near the South Australia-New South Wales border. The 75-year-old truck driver from Queensland has been charged with 2 counts of causing death by dangerous driving. The 2 dead, both train drivers, aged 48 and 57, were both from Port Augusta. The road remains closed as police from both states continue to investigate. John Pilger, journalist, filmmaker, author and activist, has died. A statement by his family said he died in London on Saturday. A multi-award-winning journalist and documentary maker, he was also a fearless and outspoken critic of the treatment of Indigenous Australians. Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander viewers have warned that the following story may contain images and voices of someone who has died.
Nothing in my career as a journalist prepared me for the horrors I found in Cambodia.
For nearly 6 decades, John Pilger used his craft to hold the powerful to account. From Cambodia under the Khmer Rouge, to Vietnam and the Palestinian question, to the treatment of Australia's First Nations people, his preferred method was the documentary. Born in Bondi in 1939, he turned his forensic gaze inward, often giving the world a searing portrait of what life was like for the country's Indigenous population.
And apartheid has run right through Australian society for as long as I've known it, and I was born and grew up there, and I've filmed there over many years. Perhaps the reason why is that the Aboriginal people, unlike the black people of South Africa, are about 3% of the population.
He looked immediately at policy failure, and he exposed the hypocrisies, the atrocities, the dispossession.
Highlighting the high rates of infant mortality, health issues and incarceration, his films and books dealt with the marginalized. A trenchant and vocal critic of Western foreign policy, he courted controversy, especially in the Middle East and the Palestinian cause. He was also a strong supporter of Julian Assange.
It's the courage of those who speak the truth and speak up for the truth, who dissent, who stand up to the powerful. These are our unsung heroes.
Among those who will mourn him, another whistleblower.
People like me follow on in his footsteps, and hopefully other people will follow on in my footsteps. It is a long struggle, but he has certainly inspired me, and I think he's inspired a lot of others, and they will continue his fight for him.
His focus on exposing the abuses of power by governments and billion-dollar businesses ultimately came down to one thing.
Journalism is about people. It's about ordinary people. It's about the struggle of people. the struggle of people often against great and seemingly impossible odds.
He was 84. Edmund Roy, SBS World News.
Coming up, Japan's Naomi Osaka makes a winning and emotional return to action in Brisbane. And we hear why David Warner isn't just retiring from Test cricket. Let's return now to our breaking news. A tsunami alert has been issued across much of Japan after a magnitude 7.6 earthquake hit northeastern Japan near Cape Suzu. An initial tsunami wave around 1 metre high has already hit parts of the western coast, bordering the Sea of Japan, with a larger wave expected. Another quake measuring a magnitude 5.7 has been recorded. Now, this is what we're seeing from Japanese broadcaster NHK. Tens of thousands of residents are being urged to move to higher ground. Japan's government says there are, so far, no abnormalities reported at nuclear power plants in the region. Authorities in South Korea are also monitoring the potential tsunami risk. The Cabinet Secretary has confirmed there are no irregularities, as we mentioned, with any nuclear power plant. On the screen, it shows the areas of most concern. On the map, there is a major tsunami alert for the central Midwest coast of Japan. That's the flashing pink area on the map, located around the Ishikawa prefecture. The Australian Bureau of Meteorology also says there is no tsunami threat to Australia. There are warnings, though, of strong aftershocks in Japan. We will now go to our regular news and update you with more information on this unfolding tsunami disaster in Japan as it comes. The international cycling community has expressed shock at the sudden death of Australian world champion rider Melissa Hoskins in Adelaide. The 32-year-old husband and former Australian cyclist Rowan Dennis has been charged over her death. South Australian police say he was driving a car which allegedly hit her. She was taken to hospital with serious injuries and later died. He has been released on bail and will face an Adelaide court in March.
A 32-year-old Menindee woman suffered serious injuries and was taken to the Royal Adelaide Hospital for treatment. Sadly, she died in hospital overnight. Major crash officers attended the scene along with detectives from Eastern District CIB to examine the circumstances surrounding the incident. The driver is known to the woman.
Rowan Dennis, a two-time world champion, and Melissa Hoskins married in 2018 and have 2 children. David Warner has confirmed his retirement from one-day international cricket today. The opening batter made the announcement at the media conference, looking ahead to his final test match at the SCG.
Bidding farewell to David Warner and the Pink Test fundraising drive were the 2 big-ticket items at the Sydney Cricket Ground today. But Warner then made it clear it wasn't just Test cricket he was retiring from.
I'm feeling great. It's a great decision I think I made. You know, I've got to give back to the family. And also on the back of that, I think I'm definitely retiring from one-day cricket as well.
Australia's top run scorer at last year's World Cup triumph in India will be missed, but he did indicate that if his country ever calls, a return to the one-day format remains a possibility.
I know there's a Champions Trophy coming up and, you know, look, if I'm playing decent cricket still in 2 years' time and I'm around and, you know, they need someone, I'm going to be available.
With the Test series already in the bag, Warner's farewell will give the match greater significance.
Pretty special to be playing your final Test match. You know, for Davey's 112 Test matches, the impact that he's had on Australia, the way he's gone about the game has been incredible. So hopefully he can go out on a high. It'd be great to see him get 100 here in front of his home crowd.
The McGrath Foundation is into its 16th year, and its aim is to boost the number of its breast cancer care nurses from 204 to 250.
We've set ourselves a bit of a lofty goal with our virtual pink seats. This year we've set a goal of 322,000 virtual pink seats, which means that we'll basically achieve our mission of 250 McGrath breast care nurses.
Australia goes into Wednesday's New Year's Test against Pakistan with an unchanged squad. John Baldock, SBS World News.
Naomi Osaka has shown glimpses of her thunderous best at the Brisbane International Tennis Tournament today. Japan's former world #1 and four-time major champion secured her first win in 15 months after the arrival of her daughter in July. She beat Germany's Tamara Korpach in straight sets and admitted to having to overcome nerves in her return. Osaka says her attitude to the game has changed since having her first child.
The last couple years that I played before, I had my daughter, I didn't return as much love as I was given, so I really feel like that's what I want to do in this chapter, and I just really appreciate people coming out and people knowing me and cheering for me, because I feel like there was a time that I was just a little kid trying to watch my role models play, so it feels really surreal sometimes to be playing on these courts.
It was a late-night finish in Perth, with Serbia clinching its United Cup mixed doubles tie against China just before midnight. Men's world #1 Novak Djokovic teaming up with Olga Danilovic to secure a 2-1 win. And Ange Postecoglou has played down a sideline altercation that saw him given a yellow card during Tottenham's win over Bournemouth this morning. The Australian was happier, talking about the fact that despite some poor form, his Tottenham side is now just 3 points off top spot in the Premier League.
Yeah, we all just came together and wished each other a happy new year, mate, and made some resolutions. Well, if I'm not mistaken, we're 3 points off the top. So, if 3 points is the difference between having a great season and where we are, well, I'll take it.
Had plenty of food for thought.
We have a great performance against Liverpool. We had a great performance against West Ham and we didn't win. And today was the one that you have to isolate because that was the worst performance of the season.
Coming up, we'll have more on that breaking news of a massive earthquake and tsunami off the coast of Japan. The details coming up next. We are returning now to our breaking news. Tens of thousands across Japan's western coast have been urged to move to higher ground. It follows a tsunami alert anticipating waves of up to 5 metres high. And it comes as a magnitude 7.6 earthquake hit the country's northeast. Japan's Prime Minister has warned residents to prepare for further aftershocks. He said emergency crews are inspecting reports of damage across the affected prefectures. Now, on the screen are some pictures coming to us from NHK. It shows some details of where the areas of concern are, and you can see it in the flashing pink area. A major tsunami alert for the central Midwest coast, and that is the Ishikawa prefecture. A population of around 1.2 million, and it's about 300 kilometres west as the crow flies of Tokyo. As mentioned, Japan officials are warning residents, in particular in some parts of that area, to prepare for further quakes, calling on the possibility for people to evacuate. The Prime Minister also instructing the government to do everything possible to ensure the safety of people's lives. So this is some developing news coming from Japan as we speak on New Year's Day of a tsunami warning, particularly for the central western part of the country around the Ishikawa prefecture following a major earthquake at 7.6 magnitude. Let's go now to the weather forecast. Troughs are triggering those storms and showers in New South Wales, Queensland, the Northern Territory and Western Australia. Troughs are also drawing heat across the northern interior and the west. Major centres, partly cloudy in Sydney, showers and a possible storm in Canberra. Showers developing in Melbourne, cloudy in Hobart, partly cloudy in Adelaide, clouds in Perth, a shower or two and a possible storm in Darwin. And as you heard earlier, possible storms and heavy falls in Brisbane. Further afield, partly cloudy in Port Vila, thunder in Nandi, thunder in Papeete, partly cloudy in Noumea and Auckland, fine in Wellington. In Southeast Asia, partly cloudy in Bangkok and Phnom Penh, thunder in Kuala Lumpur, Singapore, drizzle in Jakarta, thunder in Port Moresby. North, fine in Beijing, rain in Seoul, clouds in Tokyo and Shanghai, fine in Taipei, partly cloudy in Hong Kong. Further west, clouds in Beirut and Tehran, partly cloudy in Islamabad, fine in Mumbai. In Europe, snow in Stockholm, drizzle in Dublin and Berlin, rain in London, cloud in Paris, Madrid and Rome, rain in Istanbul, cloud in Athens. Africa, fine in Algiers and Casablanca, partly cloudy in Cairo, thunder in Lagos, partly cloudy in Nairobi. In South America, fine in Caracas, cloud in Panama City, partly cloudy in Bogota, rain in La Paz and Rio. In North America, fine in Toronto, New York and Washington, partly cloudy in Havana, clouds in Mexico City. That is the world this Monday, New Year's Day. I'm Ricardo Goncalves from the SBS World News team. Good night.